Hey everybody, I'm here today to tell you and show you how to get your driver's license. This will be a complete guide from start to finish. Now, every place is going to have different requirements. Every province, every country, every city, every state, and so forth. I live in Toronto, Ontario in Canada, so I'm using this as a guide because most places are going to have a very similar system. And I've also spoken to many people who've passed their driving test in different states, in different provinces, and so forth, and the system is very similar. So like I said, this is a rough idea. It's not going to directly apply to everywhere exactly, precisely, but it is a rough idea because it's going to be very, very similar, if not the same. Let's get right into it. Step number one is to study. Okay, when you are getting ready to get your license, when you're approaching the age where you can legally get your license, or when you want to get your license, if it's after the minimum legal age, you need to start studying. Now, obviously, you want to read your local driver's handbook from start to finish a few times. And it won't take you that long. They're usually not that big and not that thorough. But what you really want to do is study how trusted good drivers are driving. So if your parent drives you around and they're a good driver, look at what they do. Now, granted, some of the things that they do might not qualify. They might not qualify for getting your license. They might have lost some of their good habits over the years, but for the most part, most good drivers will have most of their good habits intact 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years later after getting their license. So study the book and study what trusted drivers are doing. Number two is get your learner's permit. Now in Ontario, that's called a G1, at least at the time of me recording this, that is your G1 license. In other places, it might be something else, but usually there are going to be certain stipulations with your learner's permit. It is a license that grants you the ability to legally learn how to drive. That usually doesn't mean you can just go drive by yourself. Usually there are legal requirements and stipulations that go along with it. So study what those are, go get your learner's permit, and figure out what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do, okay? Number three, go to driving school potentially if you want to. I myself went to driving school and I loved it. It was great. I learned a ton from it. And I recommend that people go to driving school if it's in their books, if you know what I mean, if they want to go to driving school, basically. Number one, it costs money. Number two, it takes time. So if you have the time and the money to go to driving school, I do recommend it. And I recommend that you learn through videos on YouTube and stuff like that as well, right? I mean, but I definitely recommend doing it because I did it and it was great. If it's not for you, you still want to learn how to drive. So driving school doesn't only have to be the official accredited driving schools. It might be creating your own driving school by watching videos and tutorials showing you how to drive, right? So you want to learn how to drive through some form of schooling and education for driving. Put it that way. Number four, practice. You want to practice a ton. The majority of people that fail their driving test unfortunately fail because they didn't practice enough. There is a small minority that fail because something happened to them on their tests and stuff like that. They got rear-ended, whatever the case is. But the majority of people fail because the majority of people that fail because they didn't practice enough. So spend a lot of time practicing. You want to start by practicing just a bit as you're learning. And then as you progress and you get closer to your driving test, you want to practice more and more and more. I remember my mom was essentially the one who taught me how to drive. My dad taught me how to drive, but he's a really nervous person. So it was more like at the beginning, he kind of gave me a few lessons. And then my mom was the one who like just let me drive by with her, you know, on the road, not by myself. I was driving with her in the passenger seat on the road. My dad would only let me do it in parking lots because he was a really nervous person. He still is. But my mom was the one who was mostly letting me drive on the road. And essentially, as we got closer to the test, she was allowing me to drive like 2 hours a night, right? It went from being like half an hour a week to getting to the point where we were driving 2-3 hours a night. It's a lot for a parent or a sibling or someone to teach you how to drive, to let you drive that much. But in reality, the more practice that you have, the better off that you'll be at being more likely to pass your test and get your license. Once you're done practicing and you're ready to get your license, step number 5 is go to do your licensing test, your driving test, and get your first part of your graduated license. In this case, where I live, it's called the G2 at the time of me recording this. I don't know if it's going to change. I have no clue, okay? And I am going to release this in a while from now now, so from the time that I'm filming it to the time that I release this video, it might even change. I have no clue, okay? But right now it's called the G2. And what it means is that you're allowed to drive alone, but with certain stipulations. In most places, you're gonna get like a second license, which is like, you know, your first part of your driving alone license. But there are gonna be certain stipulations. So get your first part of your graduated license, and then you know, learn what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do, okay? And you want to practice driving. You want to get comfortable driving alone and get ready for the next step, which is to get your permanent license, or your next graduated part of the license. In this case, where I live, it's called the G license, which essentially means that you can drive with just the regular stipulations that all other drivers have. You know, there's regular like legal things that you're allowed to do and you're not allowed to do, and that's basically it. The key here is to practice for each step, okay? You need to practice for each step, because if you try and do it without practicing, you might pass, of course, and you try and do it without studying, you might pass, but you probably won't. That's the reality of it, because we wouldn't just have all licensed drivers who don't know how to drive on the road. I know most drivers have lots of bad habits, but in reality, they know how to drive. So at the end of the day, you need to know how to drive in order to be likely to get your license and pass your test and get your license and so forth. That's it. That is how to get your driver's license, a complete guide from start to finish. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. Let me know what you think down below as a comment. And of course, be sure to subscribe for more great videos just like this one. And that's all I have for you today. Thanks for watching.